So welcome back.
Thank you.
The last time you were here, 6 years ago, maybe?
I don't remember as well as you.
I think so. But one of the revelations, because you do so much work in medicine and research and just brilliant work, and we'll talk about it all. But I think the biggest news is I'm looking at a man that looks 30 years younger than the man I spoke to 6 years ago. What happened?
Norma, first of all, flattery is not going to work because I'm here anyhow, right? I think, look, for me, this is the point. When I was young and I walked with my grandfather who was in his 60s, and it was a year before he died, and he told me what he did when he was young. And I said, how is this slow guy that hardly moves, that is obese, without hair, did what he told me to do, what he tells me he did?
Yeah.
Aging, for me, from a kid, was the major problem. When I went to medical school and they said, you can take a blood test and you can find your cholesterol and your glucose. I was like, well, but put 100 people in front of me. I wouldn't know who's high cholesterol and who's glucose, but I know who's young and who's old.
Right.
So that was the major thing. But then you discover that there's biological age and chronological age. And once you understand that, you realize that if that's so, if some people are aging slower than others, maybe we can do something about that. And I think we're finding out that we can, and we can do a lot.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think let's start at the beginning of our first conversation, which was really so ahead of what is just like a major trend now. I say trend because it's a fashion word. I'm sure it does not apply, but we get the gist. My audience gets the gist. We were talking about a lot of things that had health related and longevity. And you started to talk about metformin and about this diabetes drug. And I said, would you take it? And you said, of course I would take it. I'm taking it now. And I was like, I don't know. And you said, you should take it. And I was like, I don't know about this guy. I don't know. And I thought, that's so advanced and forward thinking. I wonder if there's really something to it. And then boom, I kept saying, oh my God, wait, you got to see this. You see this guy, he talked about this. And I started showing everybody clips from our podcast together. So talk about that and where we are now in that conversation.
So, it was always from me from a different angle. We have lots of drugs, okay? But those drugs are targeting diseases. And I was trying to see whether some of those drugs, by accident or even not by accident, that's how they target the disease, that they target actually the biology of aging. And now we're at 4 drugs like that. Okay, but I want to just say something because you introduced it like I was like crazy ahead of the time. But I want to tell you, I went like other doctors to medical school. And in the first day of medical school, they teach us do no harm. Primum non nocere. Okay, thousands of years of belief like that. So we're conservative. Okay, we're conservative. So if somebody has pain, half of us are not going to give them Tylenol. Because, Tylenol, 1 in 100,000 can does liver damage, right? The second day of medical school, they tell us something else. They say, there's no always and there's no never in medicine. So there are trade-offs, so this drug will work on 100 people and kill 3 people, and that's always going to be the truth.
Right.
And I'm telling you that because I am a doctor. I don't want to do harm, but I'm not conservative. And I'm in an area that hasn't been explored. So bring these all things together.
Yeah.
So I said there are 4 drugs now that are targeting the biology of aging. How do we know that they're targeting the biology of aging? First of all, if we give them to animals, the animals will live longer. Why animals are important? Animals were disappointing for us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But why aging animals are important for us? Because all animals kind of age the same way. You know, their skin, their hair, their musculoskeletal, they get diseases, not the same diseases, but aging is really universal. What distinct us is how many years we live.
Right.
So if you give a drug and it extends the health span, lifespan of animals, that's a good start. The second thing is that we have what we call the hallmarks of aging. Never mind what's the hallmarks of aging, okay? But what's important in that is that although you have 12 or 14 hallmarks, but by the way, hallmarks are basically something that goes wrong and you can fix it and your animal will be healthier or the people will be healthier and have less mortality. Okay? But you target one hallmark and you affect the others. Okay? That's something absolutely remarkable.
Right.
You don't have to target all those hallmarks together to get an effect. You affect one. Now, it's not a combination. It's not going to work. In fact, it's very important to have combination. We don't understand it yet, but still you have those hallmarks. So this is one thing that will make us basically kind of have the confidence that we should look at humans. So we have 4 drugs that have done that in animals. You give them to animals, they live long. Then they do something else. Those are drugs that were designed for one disease, or I should say adopted for one disease. You know, metformin, I don't know if I said it then, but metformin in the 1920s, 1950s, it's an extract of the French lilac, but it's modulated. You know, it's kind of, it's not nutraceutical because it's modulated and so it needs prescription.
Right.
But it's basically mothers, grandmothers who used it as a remedy for arthritis, for flu, for other things. It was basically used for aging. Okay? And
Really?
And then people noticed, just a minute, the people who take it and have diabetes, their glucose is lower. So it was hijacked to diabetes. Okay, and people were asking me, you know, so that's for diabetes. Why do you say it's aging? Well, it didn't start that way. But when you give metformin to cells, all the hallmarks of aging are changing.
Right.
In fact, I think the most interesting thing that happened since we talked, there was COVID.
Yeah.
And the only drug that you can take and will decrease hospitalization and death and long COVID is metformin. Because metformin is not only the diabetes, it's also immunity. It's only inflammation. It also makes your body maybe stronger.
Right. Interesting. I was taking metformin during COVID and I never got COVID. I still haven't gotten it.
I got it very mild. You know why? I've got it very, very mild.
I mean, I do now every time it's allergy time and I'm like this and I take COVID tests all the time. I keep thinking, I wonder if I'm ever going to get COVID. Not that I want it, but I thought, you know, I really attribute it to, of course, I was taking zinc and everything else that was on the list. But I do think that the inflammation and a lot of the targets that, so what are the other drugs that target aging?
So so there's metformin. There's a class of drug that's called SGLT2 inhibitors.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if I want to say the names, but Forxiga, for example, is one of them. And they also a drug that was given to animals and they live longer. Although I have to say in animal, males and females, it's in humans too, but males and females don't react similarly to aging.
I'm positive that's true.
Okay. There is a big difference. Look, women live 4 years longer than men.
Do they?
That's a lot. That's a long time. All over.
Really?
Yeah.
All over the world?
All over the world. Well, not all over the world. In the place where they don't live longer is because resources are given to the males. Okay?
I understand.
So the male will go to the hospital, the female will not. Okay?
No.
But the biology of that and most species is that females live longer. And it's not as simple as the chromosomes. There's some other things that we haven't figured out. I have to say that in this example where Forsythia extended health span, it did it only in male. But in the studies that I'm going to tell you, it did it equally in male and females. So maybe it wasn't high enough dose or something.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this SGLT2 inhibitor, I'll tell, it's burdensome to say that, but just because I want to keep, generic kind of. SGLT2 inhibitors were for diabetes. And all of a sudden, you see that people with diabetes who got there, it prevented kidney failure and cardiovascular disease. So now, and overall mortality, not disease-specific mortality, not mortality from diabetes, but overall mortality. Okay, so all of a sudden, people started giving it to non-diabetic who have kidney failure. And you know what? It prevented the kidney failure and also prevented cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
So it's a drug that you give for one thing, all of a sudden it does some other things. GLP-1 agonist, right? Ozempic, Manjaro, were designed for diabetes. And there's lots of other things that happen.
Yeah.
So now they're giving to obesity. Obesity is a big driver of aging.
Right.
And you give it to obesity, all of a sudden you see it prevents cardiovascular disease, it prevents kidney disease, it prevents Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Wow.
So if those drugs work on animal, works on the hallmark of aging, and in clinical trial, by the way, the clinical trial of not in diabetic SGLT2 for people with renal failure was 4,000 people, and in 32 months, they had a 30 to 40% effect. Didn't take a lot to prevent diseases and mortality. So those are powerful drugs. And my campaign is that we should start using them. Okay. Even if you're not sick. Okay. We should start thinking of them, and maybe not everyone and not young people, but I think people who are old and started feeling that, or they had one disease, they should be on one or a combination of those because we have them and we know that they're FDA approved, so they're safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it seems to me it's sort of the future of medicine where you can look at a drug with a different lens in different ways because it has good side effects. And so I also think, tell me your thoughts about microdosing some of these drugs to kind of test people's reactions with smaller doses, increasing to larger to see what happens.
I think this question can be only specific to a drug. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, I don't think microdosing is necessary. I think with metformin, for example, you always should start with a low dose and you should increase the dose. And the major side effect will appear immediately. And this is diarrhea. That's the major side effect.
Yeah.
And if it goes over a week, it usually goes away. If it goes over a week, you don't do the drug. And by the way, you know why you don't do the drug? Because if you have diarrhea that lasts, it means that you have a genetic defect on the transporter. There's a specific transporter to take the metformin into the cells. If you don't have it, you don't have it on your intestines.
There you go.
So it's not coming in, it's staying there and you have diarrhea.
Wow.
So you shouldn't it's not going to help you anyhow.
Yeah.
So every drug will have something like that. We will use eventually, I don't want to say even artificial intelligence. We already know a lot of the genetics, the genetic components, and the individual component where will fit your drug and will kind of predict which one is going to work for you and not. And there's also trial and error, but the trial and error can be safe. We know that you have to feel something about it, that your body might have a test that we have to test, and
Right.
we'll see it. And then you don't need it, but we'll be better at choosing the 100 people that we save and not choosing the 3
Right.
people
Yeah.
that will harm.
No, I totally agree. So, you and I have had this conversation where these drugs, for me, I lose so much weight. And the last thing somebody who's about to be 80 wants is to look like that. And so I've always been a vegetarian who eats some fish. Protein kind of wasn't on the top of my list. It was sort of through beans and different things like that. And so I lost a lot of weight, and then I lost muscle. And I was concerned. I didn't know what to do. So what I ended up doing was taking a break from metformin, and then really getting on a weight-bearing, intensive look at doing my exercises that I love. They're all very challenging, but adding in the weight-bearing and also looking at my diet and trying to introduce high protein opportunities through food. And by really, really doing a search, and I'm diligent about like trying to find these things, I found that I'm able to take 90 to 110 grams of protein a day, when maybe I used to do 40, maybe. And so now I feel like I can re-enter this drug and look at how I'm going to manage my weight, the muscle, keeping the strength. And I think it's a word to the wise, especially for women who are small. Being thin is good if it's a healthy approach to it. But being thin without muscle is dangerous, and it's not worthwhile.
Absolutely. So I want to make two points. And I told you I have this friend who's doing shipping, okay? And he has a son who's 14 years old. And I talked with him this morning, and the son said, I want to ask Barzilai something. So he asked me the following. He said, don't you think that meat was demonized and that we actually should have more meat than we do? And it was surprising to get it from a 14 years old. But the point that I made to him, and I think it's important to know, we have 100,000 years of human evolution. The major thing that happened to us to become so successful is that we started eating meat, right? Monkeys don't eat meat, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We started eating meat.
Right.
Meat increased our body size, increased our brain size, did a lot of good things for us.
Right.
So when he said, do we demonize meat? I think he's right.
Yeah.
Meat is part of our success, okay? Not only meat is part of our success, if you said, well, I'm going to become a vegetarian, 1/3 of the vegetarians are at the risk of exchanging proteins with carbohydrates, and they'll get fat. And obesity drives aging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And gets you
Yeah.
to another disease. So there are trade-offs.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying not everything is from science, the commandment from
Yeah.
Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Okay? They're actually specific. The second thing I want to say, and I think it's also important. So after I was talking about metformin, there was a paper that came up and said, and described the following. They took people who were 75 years old and they exercised them with and without metformin. And the paper showed that the people who were on metformin, their muscle, so when you exercise, your muscle grows.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people on metformin, their muscle grew less. Okay? So the New York Times, everybody said, metformin is good, is bad for you. The muscle doesn't grow. So when you go to the paper and you look, which nobody does, but there are supplements. You look at supplement 4. In supplement 4, there everything they tested on those people as far as strength. Okay? Many, grips and many other things. They were the same. So if you have less muscle, but you have the same force, that means every gram of muscle is better, right?
Oh, wow.
So I went to the investigator. I said, "Can I have pieces of muscle? And I'll give you information about the quality of the muscle."
Yeah.
And we really showed that things that have to do with muscle growth were decreased, but the quality of muscle from an aging perspective has increased. So there's trade-offs, okay? Mm-hmm. So when you said you're losing muscle, I agree that you need protein, but I really wasn't worried about the quality of the muscle that you're losing.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. I think for me, I think I had an issue with my diet being, now I still can't eat meat, red meat. And this was even as a kid. It wasn't because I needed to be a vegetarian or animals, or, I'm raised in the city. What can I say? But I just have a problem digesting it. And so I would have to lie down on my stomach every time. My father was so happy that he could afford for us to eat steak. So he would have steak as often. And every time we ate it, he would be disappointed if I didn't eat it. And then I'd have to lie down on my stomach. Now, I don't know if it's a psychological thing, but it's still.
But you have chicken, okay?
Yeah. So, but it's the red meat that for me now, not for everybody, but in my case, the vegetarian diet was easy for me and I felt good on it. But I feel adding more protein is helpful. And I think everybody should balance their diet. But I think the quality of the muscle, that's really fascinating because I think when you lose weight, your muscle reduces just like fat reduces. So that's inevitable. But if it's a quality reduction.
Right. And look, it's a challenge. And not only it's a challenge that change with age. Okay. I don't accept that you're biologically 80. That's another thing. But I think at any age, after the age of 50, we have changes that we're not sure what's the best thing for every part. And maybe when you're 60, you don't need those proteins, but when you're 80, you do need those proteins.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I think I've noticed different tendencies of things that work better for me at different times. Also, the same with exercise. The kind of exercise, things that I can do. I still do the same exercises I did at 50, but I'm adding other things and changing some of those things up. But I think the other thing that is fascinating for people to know about is how important is monitoring the body, all of these functions. How do you see that because now we're in technology age, right? What are you wearing? Are you Fitbit? I have so we want to know, but how important is that from your perspective?
So look, our revolution, the one that you've been practicing, me too, is we want to spend time on our health rather than spend time on our disease.
Right.
Okay. This is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to make everything prevention.
Right.
Those drugs that I told you are used for disease, but they prevent something else. So we have an excuse to do prevention. So when we do prevention, we are in a dilemma in the sense that, okay, let's say I stop aging now. How do I really know it? Because it's not that half of me ages and half of me not, right? How do I know that I'm doing something? And technology is important here. And I'll tell you, the main part that is still coming, it's not on your watch, is biomarkers of aging. Just like you treat cholesterol or glucose, we'll have biomarkers that if you start doing something, they should come down. They should be younger. Okay? This is, so it's important for us to kind of get obsessive on that. Okay? Just like if you had diabetes, you would monitor your glucose. So this technology is important. We want to use this technology to encourage us to maximize our health, whether it's exercise or diet or sleep or social connectivity. And this technology eventually will all have to go to an app, okay? And the app should be the thing that's managing us, not a doctor. Look, the app will tell you, you have high cholesterol, tell your doctor to do something about it. But we don't need doctor. We need a reminder. You know, technology can tell you that you're going to be sick 2 days before, okay?
Wow.
There's lots of things that technology can help you do. And absolutely, we'll use technology, and some of us will be more obsessive than others. Some of us will wear glucose monitoring too, and some of us will have 100 watches, and some of us will be blood tests. It's okay. It's okay. But for most of us, if we once a day deal with our health, it's going to have dividends.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm obsessive, as you might know. And I just love the idea of knowing what's going on so you can do something about it. So when it comes to women's health, and a lot of the people who watch my podcasts are women, we often think that a lot of people who are kind of the gurus in this conversation are men. And a lot of the conversation is done through a masculine perspective on whether it's workout tips or all kinds of things. Now, cold plunges are men and women. And you know, there are different saunas I love, I'm obsessed with. But I just think there's sort of an approach that has a more masculine ring to it. And one of the things for women that really is a constant from puberty to death is hormones or the lack of hormones, and the effect on our bodies and our minds, and how the roller coaster of the hormone in a woman's life, whether she's pregnant, about to be pregnant, finished pregnancy, pre-menopause, post-menopause, it's like boom, 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 you know. So that's very hard to monitor for women, which we would love to have. I met someone, I'm going to be interviewing someone who has a bra that measures breast information. She's very, very clever. But my thought is, where's the hormone monitor? Because if we had that, we could see, are our hormone levels correct? What do we do? How do we deal with that? And all these other things we've been talking about. And women, one more thing, women, you said, live 4 years longer, but women have dementia more frequently than men have. So we have this hormone-related conversation.
So first of all, I'm not going to answer your questions, but I'll give you insight that will be important. Anyhow. Second thing, you started with the fact that there are more males who give women advice than females. And I agree with you, and I really resent it. By the way, if the NIH, if the government now hear me say the word women, they might take my grants away.
That's okay.
That's how it is now. And we're coming, look, I'm hiring only women, okay? Because they're just smarter and get more done.
No, we work harder. We work harder too.
So, I'll tell you, we have a person who's in the National Academy of Science, a woman. She's in her 80s now. And when I asked her, so when you came to Einstein and you were 30 years old, that was 50 something years ago, and you were the only woman, what did you think? And she said, I thought two things. First of all, that I have to be twice as smart as men.
Mm-hmm.
And second, I have to work twice as hard.
Yes.
And she said, in no time, I realized that the first thing is not a problem at all.
Right.
Okay. The women are twice as smart as men anyhow. Okay. So that's an insight from a very important woman. But I agree.
And there was no glass ceiling then. There wasn't even a glass ceiling then. You had to.
No.
Yeah.
So, I have nothing. So, I'm not going to be insightful on that. You're right. The second thing that I want to tell you, we started talking about it. Women live longer than men. Now, 4 years is huge on average. 4 years is huge. We estimate that even if we stop cancer now, nobody dies from cancer, it will add only 2 years to life expectancy. And cardiovascular disease will add 2.5 years. So
that's
4
it?
years, yeah. Well, because we'll still age, right? We need to stop aging. That's why. But you understand, 4 years is not trivial. So I just want to say, you're a crybaby. You're like, yeah, what happened to us? But still, you leave us behind, right? My wife will probably outlive me.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in these 4 years, because you have 4 more years and you still age in 4 years, you also get more diseases. So in those 4 years, women have more diseases, but if the men were alive, they also would have more diseases, okay?
Interesting.
And more Alzheimer's,
yeah.
Okay? Now, I'm an endocrinologist. I was actually, I'm an internist, I'm an endocrinologist, my specialty is diabetes, and I'm still practicing those very long time, but I'm still practicing those. Why did I go to be endocrinologist? Basically because of a story like that. I thought, if we could just fix all those hormones or increase all those hormones, we solve aging.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the opposite. Okay? It's kind of the opposite.
Really?
Yes. There is a reason for that. I don't know if we have enough time to go through that, but I'll give you an example, not about women health, because, there's a study that showed actually that women in their 60s, if they take estrogen, they have more breast cancer, they have more cognitive decline, they have more cardiovascular. Yes, the health initiative. And people said, just a minute, those were already, 20 years post-menopause. Let's just keep them with hormones after menopause, and then they're good, okay? And that's where we are. Mm-hmm. But they'll reach the age of 65, and the question is what to do with them then. And we're not sure. We're getting there. It's already clear that those estrogen are not safe through all your life, okay?
Really?
There'll be, and it's individual, so there'll be years, maybe a decade.
So I've been taking hormones, HRT, since I was 46. And I had a period of time where I was doing saunas and it dried out the patch, and I experienced what it was like without the patch. Nightmare.
Yes. Yeah.
Nightmare.
Yeah. Right.
And I understand that, different decades, different things are going on, but I can't imagine, especially after that episode, which was not that long ago, not having estrogen.
And that's why I don't want to talk about you.
It's individual. Also, my case is individual.
Yeah, you should ask a woman that's dealing with it. But so I want to give you insight from another, because I told you all hormones that are going down are not safe together. So we have centenarians, 100 years old. And
how many? What do you think?
750, and we are now in a startup project that aims for 10,000. And
Really?
the reason we want them is because we're finding longevity genes. Those are genes that slows their aging. Okay? The centenarians don't only live long, they live healthy. 30 years healthier than other people. Not only they live healthier, they have a contraction of morbidity. They're sick very little at the end of their time, of their life. 30% of our centenarians don't get any drugs, and they just don't wake up in the morning or something like this. So this idea that we can live 100 years old without diseases and die,
wow,
okay, is very real. And we can do it, okay? We can do it. That's why I'm so optimistic. We can do it.
That's very
There's
exciting.
some of us that are doing that.
And is this a gene that they're born with a gene?
Right,
it's a genetic.
Right. It's a genetic. So
is it a hereditary
bad and
kind
good
of
news?
situation?
Yeah, of course. If a gene, it's hereditary. Bad and good news. I wish there was one gene. I wish that I'll give you one gene and you'll be centenarians, but it's not. However, 60% of our centenarians have some functional mutation, something on their genome that stunt their growth. Okay? We have one growth hormone, but many growth hormones. Okay?
Yeah.
So it stunts their growth. And even at age 100, okay, they already made it to age 100. Those with the lower growth hormone levels live twice as long as those without the lower.
I can understand why. I obviously, growth can be any kind of cell, right?
Right. Okay.
Right.
So you're saying you understand because of cancer.
Yeah.
Well, but it's more than that because, you know, we actually took data from UK has a good biobank, and we took 250,000 people who had growth hormone measures. And we found out that before the age of 40, if you have high growth hormones, it's really good for you. You have less diseases, you know, you have less mortality.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
After the age of 50, it flips.
Oh my God.
It totally flips because...
So in the same human or in just the population?
It's different human. It's in
the population. Okay.
But this is what happens. At a certain time, you're starting to break down, which is part of aging.
Right.
Your energy cannot go to growth anymore. You have to go, your energy has to grow to stop your aging. Right. So I think that's what we're depicting. And then we went back to animals and gave them antibodies against this growth hormone, and they lived longer and they lived much healthier.
Stop. And what are these antibodies?
They're antibodies against the receptor of a certain growth hormone.
So are they available?
By the way, well, they're not available. They're not FDA approved, but maybe you heard there's a dog company, and I forgot the name, Loyola or something like that.
A dog company?
A dog company that has we don't know what's the mechanism, but we have something against growth hormone. And they just had the announcement and they give it to big dogs because big dogs have high.
They don't, So would I also assume that petite people live longer?
There is evidence for that, but I'll tell you where the evidence. So there's an evidence that small women live longer. Okay. Short women live longer. In men, it's not so clear. And the reason it's not clear, certainly in the United States, is because of social reasons. Tall men are more successful because they're tall. They get better jobs, okay? If they get better jobs, they're paid more. They pay more for their health, okay? So it's not that they live longer, but you don't see the short people have the advantage because maybe they don't have access to medical health.
Yeah.
But it's generally believed that short people have an advantage.
That's crazy. Well, I'm proud to say I may fall in that short people. That's fascinating. So this gene, do people test for it? Or is this something you go to your doctor and say, could I have one moment, please? Could I have this test?
So the hormone that you can measure is not actually growth hormone, but it's something that's called IGF-1. Okay? You can measure that and you can see where you are. The gene, I said 60% have genes, not genes. So there are many genes,
Right.
okay? It happens that 23andMe, we're always looking at my discoveries, and they have longevity genes in their panel. And I know that because I discovered that I have one of them.
Really?
Yes, one that I discovered.
Really?
And I actually happen to have that. And I had no idea. I didn't expect it at all.
I think now you will live longer because you believe you will live longer.
Maybe.
And I think we all want to believe. I think that is a helpful tool. That's fascinating. And I do think that there's some aspect of that helps for the mind, helps the body in a lot of ways. So in order to look at longevity holistically, what's your view on steps that people could follow at any age? I mean, obviously at my age, there's a focus, it's being healthy is number one over anything I decide. But how to get to some sort of a longevity goal or a health goal. So for me, I still in my mind want to live to 120. Dave Asprey told me I should live to 122 because somebody's already lived to 122 to up my game. So I've just upped my game. But I think having that aspiration is part of how I decide how to live my life. If I'm going to make a decision, and then I think, maybe I'll do this to get there. But what are things that you think people should think about seriously in the longevity, the search for longevity?
So I'll make provocation, okay? But before the provocation, let me just say those 4 pillars that I say, they can be easily 6, okay? But exercise, nutrition, sleep, and social connectivity, it's not only doing them, it's maximizing them, okay?
Meaning,
if how many I did today? I did 6,000 steps so far. I'm not going to bed before I have 10,000 steps.
Did you walk here?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't. I have meetings until recently. But I walked 2,000 steps here, but
yeah.
I'm going to do the 10,000 steps. So maximizing, and there, it's not in my expertise, and we don't have enough time to say what's maximizing. But maximizing in diet means I'm doing intermittent fasting, okay? But you can do Mediterranean diet. It's all, everything is specific, okay?
Right.
You can do low carbohydrate, you can do vegetarian, there are lots of things, but you can maximize that. The same with sleep and social connectivity. So the message here, we kind of know what to do, but we need to work on that.
Discipline.
Okay? And to discipline and to change and to make sure that you're flexible and all the other things. But this is the provocation I want to say, because usually when people are doing all that and say, okay, I want to do more.
Right.
Okay? Then people will choose to do something nutraceutical. People would like to use supplements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I have a great problem with that because the supplements don't have the supplements. Maybe I shouldn't worry about it. It's good for the economy, okay? And it's not going to harm.
Well, but it's like taking a lot of those vitamins is
a lot
of work.
People who take multivitamin, there is a study that was published in one of the good publications, JAMA, where they followed 7 million people over 12 years. And they found that the people who take multi-supplements have a 4% increase in mortality.
What?
This was very unexpected, and I'll tell you why. Because people who take multi-supplements also exercise, also diet,
Yeah,
also do the other
totally.
things. So to get a signal for the multi-supplement just shows you that we don't know. It's not that we don't know the supplement. We don't know the interactions between supplements. Okay?
Yeah.
Brian Johnson and I did the same test and we were 4 years younger. Okay? But he takes 150 supplements. I don't.
Yeah.
So some of the supplements must be antagonistic.
Yeah. It's true. I like to experiment with supplements to see if I feel different. So sometimes I'll isolate and do 3 things or, change up something. I know that magnesium always works for me. I know vitamin D is just in my mind works for me. And then I'll add zinc at certain times, not consistently. But then NAD and some of these other, NMN, I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah.
I believe everything I read, but I'm not sure. And how do you know?
Exactly.
And
how do you know? Okay. How do you know? So let me start when we say the word supplement, it suggests that we have low levels and we have to supplement it. That's not really what we're doing usually. We're taking things. However, you're right, with magnesium, your plasma magnesium will probably be fine, but magnesium is very good for your muscle. Okay? That's an example. On the other hand, your vitamin D might be low. There's no study except in people with osteoporosis that vitamin D actually did any good. Okay, there's no study like that.
Yeah.
So my vitamin D is one of the lowest in the world, and I'm not taking it because I don't understand why it's low. I'm in the sun. I'm healthy. I don't understand. I think I'm missing a feedback mechanism in endocrinology. I measured everything that has to do with bone, and it's all okay. So why is my vitamin D low? Maybe it's on purpose. Okay.
Well,
so
what happens if did you test when you take vitamin D?
I didn't. I never took vitamin D.
Are you kidding?
Because I asked my doctor, why would I take vitamin D? He said, only if you have osteoporosis. I said, okay, I'll do bone scan. I actually have, that's one of the problems. I have very thick bones.
Oh, wow.
So maybe my vitamin D is because I have bones and the bones suppress my vitamin D.
Yeah.
I don't know how
that's interesting.
But vitamin D is a supplement. We have low level of that. We argue what's low level, but we have low level in our opinion. We get it, and unless you're a woman with osteoporosis, it's not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The NMN and the NAD is an interesting story in the sense that even in my lab, when I give it to animals, they are healthier and they live longer. Okay? But it hasn't been shown in humans. It hasn't been.
You're kidding.
There are studies of NMN. There are phase 2 studies in NMN for 5 years. When phase 2 goes for 5 years, you know that actually nothing happened.
Wow.
Okay? They just don't want to talk about it. And I think it's interesting to understand the reasons for that. It's possible that it's just different physiology. But for example, one of the hypotheses is that when you take it, it goes to your gut where you have microbiota and they take the NMN so it never gets to your body, for example. Okay?
Well, that's interesting.
Right? That's a possibility. It was tested in animals. It didn't show it that way. It actually showed that the bacteria get their NMN from inside the body out. Okay? So it's not. But that doesn't mean anything. But the NMN hasn't been shown to work in human studies. Now, I'm an editor in Journal of Gerontology, and I get a lot of those studies. And, when you have a study and you measure 100 things, by accident, one of them will happen.
Yeah.
We call it a false positive.
Right.
So every study is like, blood pressure decreased or weight decreased or something like that. But there's no evidence that the NMN goes to the muscle and does what it's supposed to do.
Right.
There's no evidence for that in humans. So I'm not saying it's not going to work, but I'm saying we don't know that it's working. So how do we know if things are working? I think that's the most important thing. Nutraceutical, you can sell. Okay, you're the FDA, as long as you show the FDA that you have it in your drug, you can sell it. We're trying to have a pathway where the FDA could actually, we want to encourage people who do supplement to do studies and show us that it's doing something.
Yeah.
If somebody promises you the moon and you ask, what's the study? And the study is not what we call a clinical studies. It's a double-blind study that half of the people are placebo, half on the drugs, and they have outcomes that have statistical significance.
Right.
If you don't have that, which we have for all those FDA-approved drugs, you cannot say that it does anything. I'll give you an example. Mars, chocolate. They did a study on 20,000 people. It's called the Cosmos study. They gave half of them chocolate powder, flavonoid, and the other half got a very tasty powder, but didn't have chocolate inside.
Oh, wow.
And in I think a 4-year study, they had significant decrease in cardiovascular disease and some other things, okay? So in fact, they showed on a clinical study that chocolates have an advantage. But they cannot write on their chocolates, this will prevent heart disease, okay? Because it's nutraceutical and you don't have this pathway.
Plus, there's not all the milk and the sugar and everything
Absolutely.
else. Yeah, a couple of other little tidbits. I have to say, I've been I haven't had coffee in quite some time. And even I used to drink a lot of green tea and I've reduced that a lot. But I have cocoa via every morning with powdered protein or collagen or something like that. And I love it. And I don't know if it's psychological, but I feel like I'm doing something good for myself, and it tastes so good too. And it's a happy change from coffee that made me so jittery. And like by 11 o'clock, I was like, I didn't like that feeling. And even green tea can get a little,
So I take Cocavia pills.
Pills?
Yeah. But
you're
I want to tell you about
out.
coffee.
You're missing out on the
Maybe you're right. You're right. I'm listening. I'm learning from you too. So, coffee, just that you know, it's a very good example. There are people that cannot tolerate coffee.
Yeah.
Their heart rate, asthma, things like that. But I'll tell you that there's a dose response between number of coffee that you drink and longevity.
Yeah, no, okay? I've read that too.
Okay.
Yes.
And by the way, until it falls at 8, if you have more than 8 cups, then you have less.
Then you're just shaking.
Yeah, but no, because I think who drinks more than 8 cups? They're working at night.
No,
right?
I know people.
They're working at night and they have no life.
I used to drink 10 cups of coffee when I was in my 20s, 30s. Yeah, before I got smart about, what you could do for your body. So I drank a lot of coffee. No, I like to sleep. So there comes at 12 o'clock, I think you take the caffeine and you put it to bed so you can go to bed.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have coffee after 3 o'clock. That's my
you're still good for what? So you must go to bed late.
Well, 10, 11.
Yeah, I'm sometimes I get up very early, so I go to bed early.
How many hours do you sleep at night?
I would say my average is probably 7.5 hours.
That's good.
Something like that.
That's good.
Except for the tariffs that have taken me into less sleep than before.
Yeah.
So on the idea then of testing, one more thing, what should people make appointments to get tested? Are there specific tests they should ask for to kind of have a sense of what's going on with their bodies?
So we're hoping to do the following study. Let me just say, I measured 5,000 protein in 1,000 people between the ages 65 and 95. And I have a really good map of what's changing during this time. That doesn't mean that if I exercise everyone or they diet or something, those will change. So I have a study that is now in a government establishment that's called ARPA-H. You know, DARPA was defense, ARPA-H is health, where I suggested we're taking studies that have ended on those 4 drugs that I told you.
Right.
Okay. And take so the studies are already ended, but they have blood. And let's measure the blood within the first year of therapy and see what has changed.
Right.
Now, every one of those drugs might change different proteins, but they'll all change the aging too.
Right.
And those will be the biomarkers that we will be using for us. It's not here yet. Okay. It's not here yet. But I want to tell you.
How far away do you think it is?
I don't, it depends on money, really. It depends on the government. We were going to do that already and now it's delayed. So I don't know what to tell you. It's always slower than you want it to be.
Is Bobby Kennedy into any of this longevity stuff?
No, there is a
Supporting
Kennedy that's in that, but it's the Kennedy Smith.
Oh, okay.
Smith, okay. So, okay. But those proteins, so I want to tell you something about the future. So we actually, it was a great study. We published it in a Nature Medicine paper. Everybody read it. And then we discovered that what we're measuring a lot is the breakdown of aging. And so we actually looked at those 5,000 proteins and we're looking for the proteins that we knew could come only from an organ, a specific organ. 22 things from the brain, from the pancreas, from the liver. Okay, 22 different organs. And we could see that each of those organs age, the correlation. So I know your whole body aging. And when I look at each one of your organs, it's kind of there. But there are people who, let's say they're slow agers, but their liver is aging fast. So we want to understand what's there in their liver. Are they getting cancer? Do they get cirrhosis? Are they drinker? You know, something like that.
Right.
We have people who are slow agers, but their brain is aging fast. So what's going on with them? But it gives you also perspective that not only will we have the biomarkers, not only will the biomarkers tell us if we're doing something good, but we could also look at which of our organ is leading our aging and we'll take care of it ahead.
Wow. Well, it's fascinating and you are amazing and I really appreciate you coming. We have to have another date set for the updates. You look fantastic.
We both look younger than we used to. So, you know, but we don't have to wait 6 more years.
No, we don't. Anyway, I think, more and more people are curious about these things, want to know. I think more and more people want to measure. These devices have opened up the mind to understanding how you sleep and resting heart rate, all of that. What does resting heart rate really mean in value? What is that?
Too long.
Too long? So, but it's something people should think about.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There is resting, there is heart rate variability. There's lots of things that influence your health. And I think, you know, knowledge is power, really. Knowledge is power. So, I think we should measure and we should be obsessive. But, you know, obsessive not in a way to ruin our lives.
Yeah.
We have to spend, I think we have to spend an hour a day on our health, which means exercising mainly and also monitoring something, right?
So when you do your steps, are you including your exercise in those steps, or do you look at it as a separate count?
Those steps are everywhere, but I know, so when I do the Fitbit, right, and I look at my map, okay, some of the steps are because I'm Pelotoning, right?
Okay.
How do I know? Because the pulse goes up.
Okay.
Okay, the pulse goes up more than the walking.
Okay.
So you have to do the walking, you have to do the cardio.
And so it's combined in there,
right?
Because
but you're right, it's not combining you to a score. In other words, I was at the Vatican. We had a longevity symposium at the Vatican. Didn't help the Pope, but we were walking like 20,000 steps in Rome.
Of course.
And I think that when we're at home and exercising and Pelotoning with 15,000 steps, we're probably doing better.
Yeah.
Okay, not every step is the same.
Yeah, I agree. I asked that because I think some of the exercise I do is very intense in a good way, but I don't think it's measured in the same way that walking does, right? So I think there's an interpretation, but it's all good. And you really are a wise man and very kind to spend time with me.
I love you.
I love you too.
You're lovable.
Hey, press follow and leave a comment after you listen to the podcast. Thanks.